DeepSeek R1 model is phenomenal. It basically brought reasoning into limelight, right? So O3 and search-based reasoning, O1, O3 and so on has been around a little bit. With R1, it just got democratized, right? So I feel reasoning became quite a bit democratized, but also the whole industry feels like it's kind of upside down, that the agent is basically reasoning and planning. So that's why reasoning is a very important area. DeepSeek R1 is a model that's really good at reasoning. Even though their benchmarks are on like math and coding, at the end of the day, what the model is doing is like it's taking time to think through how to solve the problem. Once we have that capability, which we can now distill into other models, I think it's going to basically vastly improve how AI applications are built.
Really great to gather together with you, Mahesh and Annie. Like I mentioned earlier, we actually work in the same team at GoogleBrain. But it has been 5 years from the last time we met together. Yeah, so let me actually do a quick intro of both Annie and Mahesh. So Annie used to work in the Google computational recommendation teams, Comrec team. So we did a lot of amazing algorithms over there. And then after you left Google, you went to Turing and manage a team of 200. That's amazing. And I'm pretty sure you also have a lot of learnings from the process. You also have a journey on that. Mahesh also worked on neural recommenders teams, also worked on YouTube back then, and many other applications. And then later also worked on a lot of exciting projects with Deepmind as well. And recently also started your own startup, Bespoke Labs. And that is your recent fundraising. That's congratulations. I did a very brief intros of two of you, but I think the audience, do you want to know a deeper version of what's happening? So maybe you can share a little bit about your journey. Maybe Mahesh, you can start first.
Hey everyone, my name is Mahesh. I was at Google Deepmind before this, recommendation systems and basically applying LLMs to improve recommendation models. So I think overall I spent quite some time there, and towards the end I became more of a, researcher as well, and probably gained some irrational confidence that I can solve problems, and so I decided to start a new company. So my company is called Bespoke Labs. So I can tell you guys what I do, but maybe the other thing is they say show not tell. So if you guys go now to Hugging Face and go to the dataset section, the second and third trending datasets are from us. Basically what happened was once DeepSeek came out, we basically reverse engineered and distilled and created a good dataset, which and of course created the second best model, which is on the 32B category, and open source the dataset. So it's now widely used to basically train reasoning models. And in general, yes, what our company works on is data curation. I can tell you guys more about it later, but basically creating tooling for improving synthetic data generation and things like that.
It's a very exciting area that Mahesh is recommend. Please go check it out. He has a lot of responses. Now, thanks everybody for coming. I'm very excited and happy to be here. My name is Ali. Before I actually even joined Google, right? So I actually already worked in startups, so this is not my first time in a startup. So if some of you are from China, if you ever bought cosmetics on Tmall, on some of the major cosmetics brand, that's all coming from me. I have been building that with my team at the time. So I can talk more this time. But then I decided I want to go to try out to learn where all the most hardcore and more the most challenging problems are, and decide I'll join Google. And that's how I end up in Google. Now in Google, I spent almost 9 years, and then I was working in few things. I basically have a software engineer background, so I spent 4 years basically printing money for Google in Google Ads. After I printed a lot of money, I decided that why don't I go burn some money, right? So that's how I went to Google Research. Because Google Research, you basically train models, right? And then you burn money. You're basically a cost center, right? So that's how I ended up into there. And in Google Research, in Google Brain, right? Later we joined the Google Brain. I joined Google Brain. The problems I work is all about and also machine learning infrastructure. And I like a lot of people, and also before I joined Google Research, I have this let's say imagination that everybody in Google Research are working on machine learning. It has to be super PhD or professors of professors, emeritus, right? I'm not that kind of persona, right? It turns out that I joined there, I found a niche where it's getting things done. as a software engineer, really what I found really exciting and fun, and I love to talk more about it, is really how do you actually bring theoretical and bring it into production and actually impacting users real world so that like people using it in the day, right? You, me, your friends, like people around actually get to experience the positive of it. That's how I end up in Google research. Now that later on, I decided that I want to try something more exciting, and Paul Graham all mentioned about I forgot the name of the article, but it's about like advice I would give to high school students, like keep your options open, expose yourself to new experience. That's why I left my comfort zone and decided to jump out to startup, and that's where I ended up in Turing. Now in Turing, like now basically I am most recently I'm basically like managing a team of 200 plus people. So what I do are a few things, right? So you know like you can work in Google and know how Google trains a model, or you can work at Apple and know how Apple trains model. We work with all the major tech companies. So what I do is that I look at all the secrets, how every company trains with it. And you know what? One of the things is that if you can't be them, at least be as close to them as possible. See all the things and learn, right? That's how we all learn from the job. So that's how, like I said, like it really exposed me to new experiences that I feel really excited day to day. Yeah. But like I think like I'd love to ask any questions later if you have any. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing. You both have an incredible journey at Google, and then you decided to do your own startup or join a startup. I'm curious, then, how many of you are startup founders or are working at early stage startup? Right? Yeah, a lot of you. Right? How many of you have experience to work in bigger company like Google before? Also a lot. This is also a question that many of you asked early on. It's like, because you have the company like Google Brain, Google Research Mind is very, very different than startup. What is your biggest challenge? Do you have any culture shock or any type of shock as you are joining starting journey?
Basically, nothing works outside Google. So at Google, it's like everything is, how do we put this? So it's like the difference in infrastructure is like what?
Pampered, right?
No, I mean that's one aspect, but in terms of say infrastructure and how polished things are, the infrastructure is extremely robust, right? So you don't need to worry about the test infrastructure or CI/CD and so on. So it's like the difference between eating street food versus maybe Michelin star cuisine, I guess. But so you get used to one way of working, and outside is like you just have to figure out everything, right? So that is challenging, but also part of the appeal. So that's one.
Yeah, so when I jumped out to the startup, so like Turing when I joined is basically a Series D startup, so it's not like brand new, so I'm not a co-founder, right? I think one of the things that shocked me, even though I have gone through it before, is that like really nothing works. When I mean pampered, is that you have a lot of good toolings like ready. Basically, you don't have to worry about like around monitoring, scalability, and like so. Before I left Google, I am a manager already. So what I do is that like people understand managers don't need to write code, but I actually still do. And when I joined Turing, what I think I left an impression is that like not only I manage, I also write code and I know a lot. And like at the time when I joined, there's really nothing like no unit tests. Like you'll be surprised a Series D company doesn't have it. Yeah, there isn't. It's broken. No monitoring. The first day I got on the job, it was a production issue, sending out an email on an infinite loop. So that was like the production issue. So what turns out the culture shock was that like not only things are broken, you have to be the only person to say it. You expect there are other people to do it. There's no other people. Even though it's a company, it's a startup with more than just you. You're the newest person, but there are other people. It's still broken and you have to do it. And that's the fun part in startup. You were wondering whether or not you know how to do it, but you have to know how to do it. That's the fun part, yeah, and also the shocking. But I enjoy it a lot.
Yeah, thank you for both for sharing that. One thing both mentioned about is that big companies generally have much more robust infrastructure. From my experience, they also get a lot of advantage, not just in the infrastructure, but access to channel, the go-to-market channel. If you work at Google, you can easily talking on the hundreds of millions of users. You don't even need to worry. But then when you're doing a startup, you start to realize, can I find 10 users content? That's like every day of your life. It's like that. So that's a lot of the founders like also feel the same way. It's so different. And many of us have a question: how a startup with so little resources and don't have enough people, don't have enough good infrastructure, it's going to compete with big companies? How do you compete with big companies? From your perspective, for example, how Facebook going to compete with big companies?
You just have to move fast, right? So there are good people everywhere, but what happens in a bigger company is there are lots of processes set up for good reasons, right? So you don't want to make a mistake in like Google. So there is all sorts of not only tooling but also processes in place, which of course slows things down. But for a startup, you don't need to worry about it. You just decide and execute. So in fact, I can give one example of what happened. Is actually this was last Monday. DeepSeek came out. So DeepSeek R1 was announced Monday. It was a MLK holiday. I'm sure most of the companies are trying to figure out what to do. In our case, what happened is like we look at the paper and then within no time we decide, okay, let's just reverse engineer and create the data set. So the main thing what DeepSeek did was they introduced this reasoning model and they open source the model, but they never released the data. So it's very powerful to have the data because once you have the data, you can train your own reasoning models, right? Vertical specific or not. So now nobody has the data, and I'm sure a lot of other companies may be thinking, okay, can we do this or not? They may have to have various meetings. For us, it's like, that evening we decide, okay, we'll just do it. And within 1.5 hours, we started to basically set up the pipeline to get the data, and we had finished getting the data. And next day, we trained the model, and within 48 hours, we were able to announce. So that's the velocity, right? So that kind of velocity I could never do if I was at any reasonably large company. So I think that's one key aspect, and of course you have to be very focused on specific set of things. Google is like, for example, trying to do possibly everything under the sun, whereas we are like very specifically focused on a few things, and we are trying to basically execute and get an aim out of it. So execution speed.
I can talk more about it like super early startup. I still have somewhat of the luxury of self-team help us do it. But what is different is a startup, especially so their title really doesn't matter in a startup. Okay. So when I first started, I like to talk about the case where in 2022. So 2022, like a lot of you might have remembered, the economy was crashing. It was like the best time to join a startup. Quotes. And so at the time I joined Train, and I found that like one of the things is that like startups are holding back from hiring people. And then we were pivoting to enterprise clients. Now we have a lot of enterprise clients now, but back then Train started out small company, enterprises don't work with us, right? So what happens was that like our hiring process, actually like our AI matching process doesn't just work well with it. We're bleeding clients, bleeding revenue. You imagine everybody knows this problem, but then like people are so used to it. So what happened was that like even though I am just one of the engineering managers at the time, right? I wasn't even at my current role at the time. What I did was that like I was basically nobody like limits me from doing it. I just put together a pitch and I look through the customers and feedback, why they are not hiring people. Because like, think about this way. A startup, there are many startups. You talk to them, they don't hire you, they move away, they lose trust in you. In enterprise, they sign a deal with you, 100, they hire 100 people. And you mess up the first and second, you lose the trust, they're gone forever. With all the revenues, everything is gone. You can't afford to bleed clients. So what happened was that like I found out like, let's just put it this way, I researched and talked to people and looked at the videos, what happened in some of these processes, like how do people interview, how do people take tasks. And I said that, you know what, like I need to teach the founder to really change the business. Long story short, like I was able to bring together a write-up that was able to get the pitch, and I started a team which eventually become all that I have been doing here. You would imagine that in a startup, like if you're not a founder, you don't have much to control. You don't have much to influence. Actually, if you dare to, you can actually make a lot of difference. And because like the CEO is always accessible, the CTO is always accessible. That's what I like about like being in startup. And also that's also the reason why I found training is a place that I really like, because like it's a place that allows you to influence. You want to make a place that you can influence, you have a say in the future of the company.
Well said. It also aligned with my experience very well, because I had the exact same question when I left Google. Is that I used to work amazing teammates, and we have a few hundreds of people like us. And now we just work on our own. How are we going to compete? The velocity matters, and those you mentioned. And how to achieve velocity? I realized there's two things that really help us out, but that's the reason why big companies never compete. There's the intentional ignorance of process. Because as company gets bigger, you have all these processes that's designed and optimized for step and go. But when there's disruptive change, for example, these large language models coming, the old processes no longer work. However, the big companies still stick to the same processes, which make them move slower. One example I have is that Google was talking about adoption AI coding. And I read that, 20% code written by the AI, and I just fact checked with like former friends. And it's mostly autocomplete. So it's not really like generated by AI. But at Hashi, actually 95% of code is generated by AI. There's only a very small part of code written not by AI. And this is the reason we intentionally ignore a lot of the so-called best practice of Google, and we make our code base related to cursor-native company. And so that's very different. So this is intentional ignorance. We intentionally write certain type of unit tests because the way that AI code writes, if you have AI generated code, have AI unit test, for some part it doesn't make any sense. So that's one thing. The second is also my mentioned laser focus. Because big companies have a lot of resources that just spread thin. And you need to find the specific points in which they can focus, and oftentimes you win. And the example you mentioned about DeepSeek is actually fantastic. Because one thing about, for example, I test DeepSeek, the same thing with the adult is amazing, and I'm actually also see that doing the same. And it's, people in the research community just crazy the day they went out, even before R1, B3, when they come out. Because in terms of the model capability, it just simply better. Only doesn't support multi-model and all the fancy things, but it's just like better, and we realize that. Well, the big companies often like those very destructive of many things. And since we're talking about DeepSeek, and it's about both of you think about DeepSeek, what's happening?
What's happening? The world is changing, I think. I mean, the DeepSeek R1 model is phenomenal. Of course, there is so much discussion around, various political aspects, but if we ignore all of that, it basically brought reasoning into limelight, right? So people have been kind of working on it, but O3 and search-based reasoning, O1, O3, and so on has been around a little bit, but with R1 it just got democratized, right? So I feel, of course, reasoning became quite a bit democratized, but also the whole industry feels like it's kind of upside down. Do we have a moat or whatnot? All those discussions are going on. But what is exciting to me is that now with DeepSeek R1 and all these reasoning models, you can, if you take a step back, a lot of people want to build agents, for example, right? So what is primarily needed for agents is, the agent is basically reasoning and planning. So that's why reasoning is a very important area. So DeepSeek R1 is a model that's really good at reasoning. Even though their benchmarks are on like math and coding, at the end of the day, what the model is doing is like it's taking time to think through how to solve the problem. So once we have that capability, which we can now distill into other models, I think it's going to basically vastly improve how AI applications are built. So I think that's phenomenal. And of course, the other aspect of what DeepSeek Unleashed is like, what's the mode for OpenAI, right? So yeah, or all these big players.
Yeah, I think like when DeepSeek came out, the first thing is that there's a lot of I would say concern and also fear. People react to it. I have a lot of friends who actually reach out to me from even virtual communities to ask me what's going on. But I think it actually for this problem, I think it's actually a good thing because a lot of companies that I also spoke to directly researchers and whatnot. Turns out that there are companies who want to invest and use generative AI or even have their AI models. There are other companies that are not just big techs, right? But these are IPO companies, right? They want to have their models, but it's too expensive. What we found is that people tend to, at least before they assume that hey, it's gonna spend a lot of money to actually train an AI model. What turns out is that actually you can build on top, and then with a very much lower cost, you can actually be very efficient. Basically, the innovation of DeepSeek is efficiency. Really make it really fast, lower drastically the cost. Maybe not as low as the cost they claim, right, when you actually try it, but it definitely chops a large part of the cost. What this means is that there's now a lot more players in the field, more companies that have the opportunity and optionality to actually do this and participate into this kind of LM research and the playground. And the other thing is that we're now seeing maybe a lot of these large companies doing this, but I think in the near future, this will enable more companies, like let's say Target, like Mars, like these type of companies who are not normally big to start to warm up to this. It actually opens up a lot of opportunities. What this actually even means is that like this will become even more common from a consumer level. And I foresee like look at like NVIDIA digits, right? These are all the first steps like for making things much more prevalent and commoditized. And DeepSeek is just telling us, you know what, like there's really a lot of room here for us to explore.
Yeah, this thing is like very interesting from three interesting angles combined together, and it actually gave me a feeling of ChatGPT moment again, like 2 years ago. I think the first thing is that there is an angle of the cost, because they don't not only achieve the O1 level model, but they are able to achieve like 1/3 its cost. Imagine that. Like you used to pay $30, now it's $1. It completely changed dynamics. The second thing is open source versus closed source, because we have been talking about when the open source is going to catch up with closed source, how does it change it. This is actually the first ever moment. The open source model is exactly the same as the cutting edge closed source models. In foreseeable future, open source is going to move faster. And how does it mean to the closed source players like OpenAI? Do they change its dynamics? And I think there's also a third part that is that they use just very fundamental different ways. For example, one important technique that we have been talking about training models is reinforcement learning. Many people have been arguing like that reinforcement is not useful, but it's just a cherry on top of everything. It doesn't matter, and as the people are arguing about it, you can just do the same performance with fine-tuning on that. However, it just proved that you don't need any supervised fine-tuning on that. You just can do reinforcement learning like AlphaGo from scratch. So that's also interesting by itself. So there's a lot of things happening here. And I would like to dive a little bit about the core side, because that's the first thing that Brian Glow and last week August drive NVIDIA stock crazy. It looks like 100 billion like in a day. We know very little about what's happening now, but here is that how is it possible? How they made the training so cheap? Yeah. Any take on it?
I think your question, just to make sure I understand, is that like how did they make it so cheap, right?
Yeah, based on what your guys and guess, like what might be happening here.
Yeah. So I think like two things. Like one is that like well, first like there are two ways to look at it. Like the first thing is that like if you look at why they are so cheap, there are two things I observed. As I mentioned, like their major innovation is efficiency. Okay. And one of the things is that like they basically removed the human in the loop, largely, not every of it. Basically, R10 like is the major part that removes human in the loop. They still use a little bit of human data based on my understanding in the R1 model. Now, however, like they were able to use data that has basically have a verifiable answer to basically just essentially train the model without having any humans in the loop, and that makes it very efficient. Now, on the other hand, like they actually forfeit, like the way I know it is that they also forfeit some of the case where like you actually could use more human data for, like, let me take it for example, right? Let's say if you try to feed some training data into a model, let's say like, hey, like if I go to travel, should I go to Toronto or should I go to Vancouver? There's no simple answer. For these kind of things, they actually, in the paper, they stated that they are not very tricky. Well, these are the things where they save it on. They save it on the data by using verifiable data and then using the model to train on it. The second thing, the efficiency coming on is really engineering prowess. The way I look at it is that like they train the model by minimizing so I don't know how they exactly do it, but based on my understanding, typical LM training models have a lot of distributed updates, and from what they did is that like they minimize a lot of this communication, making training a lot faster. That means that like all these together drive down to a lot of the cost. Now, of course, there are other things like that adds up together that it compounds, right? Like basically using the FPA, right, 4.8, and then like there's also the multi-latent and had latent attention, like also multiple token prediction at inference time. All these add together to a lot of use cases. But in my opinion, the verifiable data and also like having a really good training efficiency based on hardware, bus level, like the NVLink thing, those are the really major gains. But without actually reproducing it, like it's hard to tell. So I haven't trained a model. We should see if you have anything to add. Please.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, Hugging Face is trying to reproduce. So I don't know if you guys have seen the open R1 reproduction. And one quick bragging fact is that they were using our data set there. But I think the answer here, that there are two parts to the answer, right? One is of course the technical answer, which is FP8 and the various other changes they did. But also the second aspect is non-technical, which is, necessity is the mother of invention, right? So they were severely constrained on how many GPUs they have, and also the GPUs were of inferior quality, right? So H800 as opposed to H100, and 800 feels like it's better than H100, but it's actually worse. The HBM or the interconnect, I think, is worse. So yeah, they had to figure out how to make the best of what they have. And of course, so this, if you go back to the V3 paper, they say it costed them like $5.8 million, but of course that was just one run. I'm sure they spent more money on like the other runs perfecting. So a lot of people are thinking, okay, it's just the whole thing costed 5.8, but that's one run. I think Sonnet, for example, costed like in the order of few 10 millions of dollars. So FPA gives a factor of I think 4 or 2, and
Yeah,
few
a
other
lot of the
dimensions, right?
audience might not have context of FPA. Maybe
Oh, yeah.
you can share a little bit about FPA, why it matters.
Sure. So at the end of the day, you are doing matrix multiplications, and in the deep neural network. And so all these matrices, how do you represent them, including the gradients? So you can use 32 bits to represent these floating point values, or you can use 8 bits. So once you use 8 bits, you are cutting down the cost by 4. So
Yeah, basically, like typical floating points uses like 4 bytes, and you're now basically do 1 byte. So you get like so more things into the memory. So that's saving. So you can use technically 4 times less cost to do the same thing. So that's where you do optimization. Cutting it by half, right? FP16 like this, like, and especially at inference time, it's a very common technique that's already well used. But I think training time is less common. I think the first paper that did it was coming from a paper from Microsoft Research and Azure in like last year. I mean last year. Yeah, 2023 in December. Yeah. But I think at this time they basically incorporate some of the techniques. They invented some, basically DeepSeek invented some, but also incorporated some techniques really beautifully. Yeah.
And also, I think the other difference is the training and inference. In fact, both are cheaper. Training was $5.8 million, but inference, as you get, if you actually use the DeepSeek R1 API, it's like you said, like 30x cheaper than O1. For that, I think the main innovation there was using mixture of experts. So basically, during serving, you don't need to activate the full network, just parts of the network. So that's the other reason.
Yeah, those are very great points. I can share a little bit more of my my personal story side, because this DeepSeek thing is only recently breaking into the US, but it actually has been a while in China. So in the early year when I was about to start Haji, I initially wanted to do hardware. So I fly to China and talk with all these like LM companies in China. And back then they tell me some like very interesting data of that, which is like in the NVIDIA GPU. Half of the cost goes to the RAM. Like NVIDIA is working for Samsung, which provides most of this inventory of that. The Samsung is really the king on that. So think about the stocks. And the second thing is that really like increasing the memory will significantly increase the cost in terms of manufacturing. And because like Mahesh mentioned, China they have this embargo thing happening. So they get inferior GPUs, which the very important thing is like they also have very limited the memories that's in the GPUs you can use. So the first thing that comes when the Llama comes out is that they try to run this in the China version GPU, like Huawei GPU and also the lower version of NVIDIA unit. It completely broke. No one can make it work. And the whole industry was completely frustrated. That happens for a year or so. And then they started to figure out how to make it work. So heavily invest on this quantization, FP8. And a lot of people actually work on FP4 to share about the challenge of doing that and the importance of that is that because neural network is a huge matrix, and all this matrix needs to be loaded in memory at one point. And think about that, it's very, very different than how we run CPU program, which is like we read something in the hard disk, we load something in the memory, and then we write it back in hard disk. So there's not many times that everything's in the memory. But because of this neural network, everything is still in memory. So the memory is a problem, so you need to figure out something. The first thing they figure out is that why not we don't load everything in memory, so that becomes a mixture of experts. So they decided this structure that every time you only know 1/8 of the weight of the memory, or something like that. So stays in memory. but still doesn't work in the theory version of GPUs. So they need to figure out more. The thing is that like the number of memory depends on how much memory you use for each bit. So they say, oh, instead of like 2 bits, they use like 2 bytes, they use 1 byte. And that is incredibly challenging because if you change, like 2 bytes can represent a lot of nuance of width. Well, if you have 1 byte, you lose most of the information. So it's just the quantizing, the performance will be much worse than before. And so they have to quantize it first and then have to retrain. That comes the second challenge because all these open source models, they don't release their training data. They only release their weight. So when they start to do the training on this worse quantized model, it doesn't work. And then they have to figure out how to put some of the data back to make it more stable, and then also train from scratch from a lot of the times. So they need to be really good at these models in order to doing that. So like Mahesh mentioned, that's really the model invention. Because in the US, we just take it for granted. Like, oh yeah, we buy a GPU, just get money and just go and buy. But in China, because of this embargo thing, they just cannot. So they have to work more intelligently for that. So that's actually very interesting about this technology movement. And related to that, I'm also very curious. I actually did a lot of open source tooling, also like doing posting the data spaces on that. And like mentioned, I saw in one of your LinkedIn posts is that DeepSeek has done hard work for us by releasing a model. Now it's time for do the further, just continue to work on that. In the requires data, also like in the open source community, there's a whole movement of replicating and improving. What would be your take on what happened next, like in particularly about the open source and also the movement of the closed source players in the US?
Yeah, I think I will still give credit to OpenAI for inventing so many things and pioneering the field. But I do feel like the gap is closing. And this time, I think, with the gift of what DeepSeek gave, I think that there is a lot of activity going on. And the point I was making was that DeepSeek has given the models, but we don't have access to the training data. And of course, the training code, right? So Hugging Face is trying to reproduce this. So I want to mention why the training data is important, right? So like what you was mentioning, if you want to, so here is one example, right? So DeepSeek has this 32 billion distilled model, which you could use directly, or if you want to actually do some changes there, maybe fine tune a model on top of it. Sometimes what happens is the model may forget, it's called catastrophic forgetting, so it may forget what it already learned. So what you need to do is, in that case, you need to be able to mix in the actual training data that was used to train this model. So then where do we get that, right? So that's one good reason why getting the reverse or getting the training data is actually very important. So that's something that we are doing. And yeah, there are plenty of other examples. Like if you want to quantize it further and you want to do quantization aware training, or there are other techniques like you want to share the different KV layers. You want to be able to train it a little bit more. So for all of that, you need the training data to begin with. So those are reasons why it's very enabling for to be able to access the training data. And I think once we figure out the training data and also the recipe on like how to do the RL and how to do the SFT and all of that, I think it's going to close the gap quite a bit. And to some extent, if you think about it, not everybody needs like a large LLM to do everything, right? So you may just need some domain specific or task specific model, which people are already doing, but now with reasoning, you could be still doing like, okay, here is one agent that kind of understands your domain much better, and you want to fine tune that. So now, once we have access to all the data and the code, you should be able to get a pretty good vertical specific model, and you don't necessarily need all these bigger models that Claude or OpenAI is producing. I guess the analogy in my head is like, you can have a computer or a microchip, right? When you build a microwave oven or a fridge, you're not installing the full personal computer there, right? You don't need Intel inside your fridge. You just need a specific chip that can do the task pretty well. So somebody needs to be able to do that, and that I think is what we are trying to enable. And open source is basically now working together to figure out the training recipes and the data and so on.
I think like Mahesh already mentioned a lot about the thing, but essentially what I see is that like the open source community will actually, and even closed source like companies like they will just like learn to reverse engineer as much as possible and absorb this, and this will become basically a basic technique going forward. So this is a pretty major change, and it's going to change how models are going to be trained in the future. I think one thing, as I mentioned just now, is that it really opens up that people don't take it for granted that you have to spend a lot of money. To be honest, like there are very few companies who can actually do that, and like some of Mahesh mentioned it really well. Like is that like some companies are really just looking for domain specific model, and they don't need that many training data. As long as they have a really good pre-trained data, pre-trained model, and start from that, and then customize it like on their efficiently on their private data. That will be all they need. And sometimes like they already have an answer, they have verifiable data, and that's what they need already.
Yeah. Actually, I think you mentioned a very interesting concept of verifiable data. I know that's very important for many areas. For example, we saw a lot of news about AI codings, math, reasoning, like that. One of the reasons, like you mentioned earlier, is verifiable. You can get like true or false. Curious your thoughts about those things, like how does verifiability impact the results, and what's likely will be next thing that would.
So I can talk about like how verifiability impacts like even the data generation. So Turing is a company, we work with major AI companies to prepare training data, proprietary training data for them to train our models. Same office way, like I work with one of the leading AI companies, like and like at the time their model doesn't have function calling at all, and I was actually working with them to build up the data. So basically I was teaching a model doesn't know anything about function calling. On how to do function calling. A function call is basically teaching a model how to interact with the real world. Think about this way. A model like you want a model to help you search on the internet, right? So we call it web search. But how does it do it? You have to give it original training data in supervised fine-tuning format to train on it, and then like, hey, given this query, this is what you do, and you issue a search on the back end, like let's say to Google or to Bing, to Brave or to CAC, whatever search engine that is, and then you do it. So I actually work on building those data points personally myself, so I've seen a lot of variations. And then like, these kind of verifiable data, this is what we do in Turing. Now verifiable data, one of the things is that like, some of you here are engineers by professions, right? When you ask the model to generate some code, when it doesn't compile, or it doesn't run correctly, it's very frustrating, right? So one of the things about like in Turing, we later learned from our researchers is that we got a reputation of generating really high quality, reliable data points for training model. Is that like we take advantage of verifiable data in the sense that let's say we need to generate coding data points, right? How to let's say do an optical character recognition. We actually make sure the code runs and compiles. In fact, like my first team was basically building that compiler, and then we later adopted it into generating data points, right? Verifiable data actually gives you two things, right? I think one thing is that like a guarantee that there is some certain amount of quality, guarantee, and correctness in it. Now, of course, there's a whole conversation to be that. Now we know about is that like you can actually leverage this to automate something. Automate what? Well, turns out you can automate training, model training, without human in the loop, which is very important. Now, of course, like if you look into the DeepSeek's paper in R1 in more detail, think about who wrote the prompt, who wrote the unit test cases. There's still some degree of manual work involved, but it really shocked us a lot of things. Maybe in future there will be another finding where like just like how we used to train a lot of data to have AlphaGo, and then they have AlphaGo 0, which just self-play. Now, granted, AlphaGo is solving a very angular problem about checks, right? Very fixed rules. Generic LLMs or even coding LLMs, right? They are very much more complex. But I think we will get there at some point, right? We don't know when or how or what is the cost. But verifiable data is really like exploring it that way. One thing is that like when I was using those data, because I run the team that does it, you kind of have a sense that it's usable, but like being able to actually piece this all together and make it work, that's where innovation is. People can come up with ideas, but actually delivering it and proving it to others and getting it out to people to know, that's where the success of the innovation is from DeepSeek, I think. Yeah.
And actually, speaking of verifiable stuff, I think actually taking a step back, if someone, what is exciting as an LLM researcher, what's exciting to me this year, that there are two aspects. One is data, and the other is reinforcement learning. So I think the verifiable nature of basically once you have a task, and if you are able to verify and get a signal whether it's working or not, or even some sort of a number that gives a grade, that's actually very helpful in doing what's called RL-based fine-tuning. So in fact, OpenAI had announced this product December called RLT, RL-based fine-tuning. So I think that's the new paradigm that DeepSeek R1 actually also set. So in DeepSeek R1 paper, they mentioned they had two models. One is the DeepSeek R1, which you can access, but there is also the DeepSeek R10, which is basically fully RL-based, right? RL is extremely exciting in that aspect because it basically induces reasoning. And for if you want one quick mental model, the SFT, basically supervised fine-tuning, is helpful for a model to learn how to behave in a specific way. But the reinforcement learning is actually how models learn how to reason about things and think about things, right? So that's why I think RL and the verifiable nature of stuff is very important. And I think one plug to what we are building is like we are building this thing called Curator, which is a way to generate data, and it's we open source that tooling, and there we are adding in the verifiable nature of checking, for example, if code worked or not. And this is actually broadly useful, but it's not just for code, but you could have some other signal, right? You could actually have a different LLM that's grading your responses. And you can use this now in a way of reinforcement learning to basically get a good signal of or teach the model how to solve tasks. Traditionally, what has happened is like in supervised fine-tuning, you actually need data that says, okay, here is a question, here's the answer. Now what you need is here's a question, and the ability to check if the answer is good or bad. And in SFT, what happens is there is this method of what's called gradient descent. So you are making a change in the learning in one specific direction, but with RL what's happening is you can do both gradient descent and gradient ascent. So if the answer is good, you try to go towards the direction, but if the answer is bad, then that's also equally valid, right? So in SFT, we used to ignore that. So that's why I think RL is actually quite novel and interesting because it just elicits all this newer training paradigm and the reasoning side.
Yeah, exactly. So one, like I mentioned, one of the angle that DeepSeek is so exciting is it's fully RL training model. So it doesn't require the DeepSeek R10 doesn't require any supervised fine-tuning. And oftentimes, just to add on what Mahesh mentioned about why this is very important, I often use a mental model to think about how the evolution of AI looks like. Because many people might think, oh, the AI just started to show up after ChatGPT, but it's not. It's a continuous evolution that happens in the past 2 decades that happened. And if you think about AI as a stool that has 3 legs, one is the data, the second is algorithm, the third is computation, is hardware. And these 3, like, once in a while, one will be bottleneck, and people remove the bottleneck, and another will be bottleneck. And so on, move forward. And that can explain a lot of what happened in the past 2 decades. For example, with the evolution of the internet, we accumulated a lot of images, and we don't know how to use it. And we also started to have better hardware for gaming, because NVIDIA was doing computer graphics. Then by the time of 2012, someone come up with deep neural network. They suddenly had better algorithm, because that was the shortest flag in the school. They figured this out, and suddenly people see this thing changing, because you think about this is a reservoir with a lot of water, and someone opened the door, and you will see some type of what called scaling. This is the more you do, the better. That's kind of the idea. And that thing happened for a couple of years, and then what happens is all the image data has been exhausted. And by the time of 2016, they want to figure out better allocate image data. And then that comes to the second paradigm that's trying to solve a data problem. One of the exciting things about current era we are is actually the ChatGPT is driven by a technique called semi-supervised learning, which is used to take a lot of time to allocate all the input label, and they come up with the idea, let's get the arbitrary text and just do the next word prediction, or remove one word and start predicting. The beautiful thing about this thing is that you just need some text, and you don't need a label. So that solves the problem. Suddenly, all the text data that is developed by human civilizations can be used. That happens after the Transformer 2017. And then we started seeing scaling law with the more computation, the better. It's because that now the hardware has become a bottleneck. That's what will happen in the past 5-6 years. And recently people are saying we're hitting the data war, there's not enough data, which is, I think is true. I feel the way that we're actually running out because there's so many text format of data. But the one beautiful thing about reinforcement learning is that it doesn't record any label. Like one of the examples of reinforcement learning is like play Go games. You only need 3 set of rules how to play Go games, and then you just keep playing forever, and you will do it better. And so this becomes an unlimited data sources. Well, further to release that. In order to make that happen, you need to resolve the other thing, which is the algorithm. Right now is the bottleneck, because without good algorithm, we are not able to leverage that thing. So there's this interesting dynamics that happen right now, and 2025 definitely is very, very exciting years for that. I know that we're getting to very deep of technologies about LLM, but a lot of the audiences are founders. So, and also we have a lot of great questions for you, so I wouldn't get away for you to ask questions now. So this will be my last question. So think about the question, and then we'll go to Q&A session. So think about the question you want to ask. So my last question I want to ask for the founders on behalf of the founders in the audience is that every time there's exciting new technology showing up, it will shake up the industry a little bit. That will trigger new opportunities. That's happened like ChatGPT, and so many people doing startup back then. And then we realize that with the API model, we either have to do foundation model, we either raise hundreds of millions, or just do wrapper. But there's not many things you can do. And it turns out no matter how hard you do wrapper, the GPT just released it and just become to the sky. I think there's some things changing a little bit. I'm curious that if you ever do startup, one, not your corporate company. Like, what are other areas it would be exciting to you because of this shakeup?
I think, I think that's taken in a little bit of a derogatory manner, but GPT wrappers are still useful, right? As long as the consumer doesn't care if it is, if you bake the new foundation model in there or if you just wrap around ChatGPT. As long as you're providing value to the customer, that's going to be useful. So, but of course, the paradigm now, the question that people ask is like, okay, do I do all this engineering work to make this, product when the next version of, say, O3 or whatever, O4 is just going to do all of it, right? So there is some bitter lesson kind of equivalent thing there. But I guess, I don't have like a crystal ball to see what will happen. But as long as you are providing value to the end user, maybe that's fine. And regarding the question on like what I will do next, I don't know. Hopefully not one of the AI SDRs. That's my answer.
Okay, this is an interesting question. But let me talk about like the when you get disrupted, the shock, right? I think like so I don't know if folks like check Twitter. Like, I actually don't use Twitter a lot. But I think there was this tweet circulating saying that the company that should be most scared like of DeepSeek is not OpenAI or Google or Meta, but it's Scale AI. The reason is because like if there's a way to not need human to generate data, what is Scale going to eat on, right? Like that's their core business. Like likewise, that's also a turn, right? That we are operating in a very similar vein. Now, when the paper came out, I saw the shock, right, and like there's a lot of concerns, and even to be honest, there are some people asking the inside outside the company. But once you actually look into it, a lot of these disruptions actually what it does is that it shuffles the establishment and opening new opportunities. Even for trade, when I look at the business internally, like we have opportunities. Now I can't talk about it here, but what I can see is that like every time this kind of things happens, what you want to see is like, yes, you need to change. And second, yes, it's very uncomfortable, but just like life, right? It's a lot of changes and you need to adapt to it. So what I see is that like if it happens, you just have to figure out what's the next step and react. Not react, I would say respond to it. Okay, yeah. So that's how I look at it when it happens. So, and I can tell you like honestly, I did really well looking at the paper, knowing how it affects the business somewhat. But when you come and look at it, the opportunities are there. Regarding what startup I do, I think I also don't know what startup I will do. To be honest, it's too early to tell. What I think is important is I would really observe what in the next month, like how different companies, both open source and closed source communities are reacting to it. Because to be honest, how they react to it will actually impact how what you should be doing. One of the things is that it's important to digest this information and arrive to an original thought and how you provide value. And also the other thing is that when you talk about doing a startup, right, there are different people. Are you looking to become another thing? It really depends on ultimately what you're looking for, right? That's how I look at it. Yeah. But I don't have an answer what startup to do. Yeah.
I think another quick thing that I want to add is things change so much every day. It feels like just 2 weeks back the world was very different, and so maybe at that time you just have to figure out use first principles and try to figure out what is important, what will stick for a few more years. At least when I quit, my mental model was okay. At least based on all the stuff that I saw at Google. And kind of interpolate or extrapolating into the future, I felt like data is something that's critical for not just training models, but also for any startup, any enterprise to be able to make use of their own data, right? So that's why I consciously, decided to work on that. If in 2 years, if you have AJ, you'll have to figure out what to do there.
I will also add a little bit about the GPU wrapper concept. Because in fact, in my startup, Haji, and also my previous startup, we use a lot of open source models. So it's actually totally okay to do GPU build on top of closed source model name is API. And in fact, if you don't leverage that, you are losing a lot because they are doing innovation over there. And if you just do everything yourself, you wouldn't be able to compete as fast as they could. The thing I found very interesting this year compared with last year is that it's about the negotiation between the power between the startup companies that are using the technology versus the company who owns it. One model is that give you all the shovels, you build it, you can have full control. That's one thing. Another one is the API though. Just provide you an API and the instruction of money and just follow the instruction. And in fact, this is what has been the whole ecosystem been trying. It's let's work on top of purely just API and use the prompt engineering techniques to see what we can do on that. But one thing, and also as personally I learned, is that prompt engineering first is incredibly unstable. The second thing is that it's also incredibly easy to be copied if you don't combine that with other modes. So oftentimes people say, oh, if you have modes, you have the proprietary data. There's also a tricky question, how do you turn your actual data you own into a differentiating power if you don't actually send it back the data to your models? And if the data just you collect them, store in some cloud storage, and you don't leverage that, theoretically you have a mode, but in practice you don't. That's the challenging. And then the challenge here is that if you work only on API, on top of API, the leverage you have is so limited. You only have this now it's 120K token limit, you just squash and doing the same thing to that. That mode is not enough, to defend yourself either from other people who are doing the same thing or from OpenAI who suddenly decide to go to your own business. So I see an urge for developers and the startup to give more democratize the power. Why the prompt is the only interface? Who decides prompt is the only interface? And who decides if I don't get access to model, it's able to work? I think oftentimes that if you give the raw capability to people, people are creative. They will find more things on top of it. Well, that will be very interesting on 2025. I'm still going to use a lot of open source models, but I now have more tools that for me to think about. Now I have proprietary data connecting. How do I keep on this flywheel? By just having my data to make our model better, which is proprietary models, which other people will never be able to own. I think that will unlock a lot of areas. Even we talk about vertical AI, I think there's a lot of different verticals, different data on that. It also at the same time, I think that's one area. If you have a vertical, you're very passionate about that, connect more data. Now is the time that for you to actually make your models be better based on data. So that's one area. I think another area is the consumer that will take off this year. Because the cost reduction is rough, and the people have been trying consumer app for 2 years. One thing I learned is that they just don't dare to scale up because it's so expensive. Everyone gets bankrupt if they have a consumer app. But now with the cost in different magnitude, I think we are enable a lot of opportunities here. Think about all these applications that are using the internet. I think there's a chance that they're going to be reinvented by these new economies from that. Yeah, so given that, I think we'll wrap this chat part and I'll open this to the audience. So any questions, please feel free to raise your hand.
I have a question for Ali. Yeah. So I'm very interested in Curling, and I noticed that Curling actually start with like help US company to hire the cross-border like talents, like mostly like developer. Meanwhile, like I also noticed Curling recently, I think not recently, kind of did a pivot a couple of years or like sometimes ago, and I think it's transitioning into more like helping to enable the company to leverage the AI productivity and provide AI solutions. Can you basically like share more your insights during these periods, why this happened, and how you foresee it going forward with this AI solution providing?
Yeah, so like Turing started in 2018 as a company under our co-founders Jonathan and Vijay. So initially, like the company like started out like hiring for remote developer roles. Now came 2020 for better or worse, like that was a pandemic when it happened. Like that also caused a surge in the demand for these services. That was when actually Turing is really full force in this and grows significantly. Now, as we have been actually doing a lot, we start out by doing this and we're still very good at doing this. Now, at some point, like we realized like there is this like what is this company called OpenAI like now coming out to hire a lot of developers to hire the coding. What we didn't know was that they were building up the then like GPT-3, 3.5 and GPT-4 coding. I was actually one of those like setting up the task to hire those developers to train the data and then getting them set up. So what we have found out was that like we are very good at hiring people. And these companies like seems like there's a much more growing need like to hire people, and then we found that like once like OpenAI succeeded, we start to get more inbound somehow. Among researchers, maybe some of you already know about like our company Turing, but what I didn't know was that actually the word started to spread out is that like, hey, where do you get trained data? Like because we are already exhausting a lot of the public data, text data outside, and that's how we eventually decided that hey, this is a bet that we're willing to take a bet. Now, of course, ultimately, like it turned out to be work out, but you never know, right? But that's how Turing came into this space, and then like we're just starting to get out more and more, and then like we later work with different companies, like it just like snowball from there. Yeah.
I think I just want to add one. This is why I was saying OpenAI is very smart. Everyone was sleeping, but OpenAI figured out, okay, we need to get this coding data because that's what is actually driving the performance of these models. And they hired, a whole bunch of people on Turing, whereas, including Google, I think, they will figure this out. So, yeah.
Just to be clear, I think like normally like if I were OpenAI, like I would also hire admins, and of course everybody knows they hire there. But like Turing is one of those that would be hiring. At the time, I also don't know what they're for. And I realized like you saw, oh yeah, that's what they're using this for, right? They don't tell us, right? Obviously, like it's a highly confidential. But then we realize all these things, and now we have a much more closer collaboration. Yeah. And I think earlier there was like about half a year ago, there was this Sam Altman and like Jonathan, our CEO, have a like very public chat about it because like that's how deep the collaboration has been. And same thing with Jeff Dean because like with Google we're also very close.
Any other questions? Maybe.
And how do you see kind of like the innovation in 2025?
How is the innovation different between for consumer versus B2B, right? I think when I think of consumer, I think the first company that I can think of is Perplexity. Yeah, I think there are different set of challenges between consumer and B2B. Maybe I think Jing, you are probably more qualified to answer this. But yeah, I think we probably will see more and more companies that are actually successful in the consumer space, hopefully in 2025 and later. I think one thing I was alluding to is, or we were discussing is like, there is a lot more infra stuff happening now, but a lot more on the application side is going to happen on the AI side, and most of the application I think is on the consumer side. So I don't know about that.
I can give a little bit comments about consumer side because that's also my first time doing. My last time was B2B, so kind of have some perspective on both. I think particularly for consumer side, that's like people have been doing consumer stuff in the past year, like ChatGPT, the consumer stuff. The consumer stuff, the challenge in the past 2 years is that it's very hard to set up any defensible modes on top of it. For example, the ChatGPT, like the DeepSeek becomes like top one in the App Store of 19 countries because they have better models. That's it. And then people just like overnight switch to DeepSeek for that. So that's just an example. Like even ChatGPT wouldn't be able to defend themselves on that. And the reason for that is there's no switch cost for consumer app right now. Like For example, complexity. What is the switching cost? Or another side is one is productivity side, another is like also corrected AI. There's also a lot of AI company. What's the switching cost? There's no. The reason is that if you use ChatGPT for a year, it is not get smarter than the first day you use it. Exactly the same. So if you have the better model, I'm going to just switch that. So that's the challenge of the consumer in the past 2 years, plus the cost. So the early people who get more DAU in the consumer, which is very important for consumer side, doesn't help them, just kill them by the earlier. That's one of the reasons why Craig.ai was kind of forced to sell to Google because of that. They got a lot of users before being high. I think that what is interesting to identify is that because this economy is changing, people really start to think about how to make creator experience in a way that the more you use, the better the experience is. So that will create a moat. I think if there's someone figure out a moat on this, there will be a key just like TikTok, just like YouTube. The more you use, the better it is. There's actually a lot of interesting technology developing like that. Reinforcement is one of them. It's like human is the reward model, gives machine and learning on go. And also the founder of the reinforcement learning, Richard Sutton, also come up with new ideas, continuous learning, which is also just continuous updated way instead of the model just frozen. I think something might be happening this year, and that will also be big.
I'll just add a few things. I think, if you have been in a position where you have to wait between whether you launch something or not, sometimes it's just really boils down to cost. Yes, the benefits, the effects are really good, but when you compute the numbers, the budget, it just doesn't cut it. Yes, so if cost goes down, it actually enables a lot of things. And I think another thing, I think, like Jing also mentioned, is that continuous learning. Online learning is not something new in the field of machine learning. However, if we can enable it to learn better, it actually will create a moat. But more importantly, is that the overall experience will just become more clear. Right now, everything is just kind of generic. I would put it this way. Yeah. But cost is one major thing. Some of the things you want to do. I paid for the $200 ChatGPT Pro, but honestly, I paid for one. There's data that costs $500, and we tried it and we didn't like it. How many more can I sign up? I can't, right? So it's just not sustainable. And I think some of you know that about 2 years ago, in China, there's a lot of AI companies, hundreds of them, and none of them charge great for consumers, but really bad for the companies that it kills them, right? Just a lot of agents kills them immediately, very quickly. But I think with the cost going to drive down, hopefully this will actually enable more innovations and more companies to be innovative. Yeah.
But at the same time, I think that there are now, I think there was demo on Ready, right? So it's becoming much easier to build applications. So I think 1,000 flowers bloom idea. So maybe there will be millions of apps and something will work.
Yeah, in the interest of time, because we are close to 8, so we'll wrap these sessions. But we will have the social time, and the speakers will also be here. So please feel free to hang out, chat, catch up, and also come to ask if you have more questions. Yeah, thank you.
So I'm Anish, the founder of KiwiQ AI, and we're building AI agents for marketing intelligence. You can go to the next slide, please. A little bit about the team. So we're a 2-person founding team. Ronak and I have over 20 years of experience in product, machine learning, and marketing. So here's a problem we're trying to solve. It's 2025. We heard there's AGI and FSD coming, but it's still surprisingly frustrating to actually get actionable intelligence if you're a marketing team. And we're trying to fix this problem. And this, of course, has a lot of business implications as well. Marketing teams spend more than 2/3 of their budgets on tools and teams required to use those tools, etc. And we're solving this problem with KiwiQ AI. We're building an agentic intelligence and orchestration layer that sits on top of these marketing tools to help marketers get real-time insights that they can actually take action on. In my next slide, I'll give you a quick sneak peek into how you would be able to work with AI agents as a marketer on the KiwiQ platform. And if the audio works, Should also have some music in the next slide. So this is the human-in-the-loop agentic automation, where the agent's getting a few final clarifications from the marketer before proceeding to make a campaign adjustment. And this, of course, today takes marketers multiple tools, many hours of work, and then, of course, working on actually automating it on a different tool. So we're trying to streamline the entire process, agent-powered, human-guided with KiwiQ. We can go to the finals. Yeah. So. Thanks a lot for coming here today, and we'd love to have any of you join us early in our journey with KiwiQ, and look forward to continuing this conversation. Thanks so much.
Hi everybody, I'm Russell, the co-founder of Cyberfilm AI. I'm here to tell you about our app Saga. So it all started during the pandemic. I was taking an online Stanford course on AI. We had to write a paper on AI disrupting an industry. So I wrote it with my brother, he's a Hollywood filmmaker. And the professor said, A+, you gotta quit your job, do a startup, and we did. So next slide. So it's not just a chatbot, but it is generative AI. We call it multimodal and multi-model, unlike and before ChatGPT or Claude. So you start off, every page of the app, plot, characters, acts, beats, is what you learn, what my brother learned in film school. And so you can select from common story archetypes we've pre-programmed, but if you type in your log line and you need a theme or a title, we'll give you 5 ideas, some from GPT, some from Claude, and some from Llama. We have a full script editor, so if you ever have writer's block, it's like Final Draft, but you can click and say, write the next line for me, or write the next scene. We have a storyboard page, and as you can see, every time you ask for a storyboard, we give you four options from different models. And now we're moving on to animation. Next slide, please. And so you can see with these turkeys here, it's quite good. And so next slide, please. The idea would be each of these can be up to 60 seconds long. We have your full script. So with our 11 Labs API, basically we'll have a button at the end that says generate entire movie. And we're in deals with Amazon and Google YouTube to auto-upload movies. So yeah, if you want to learn more, come talk to me at the networking session. We are raising a seed round led by our angel and pre-seed investor, Jason Calacanis, the All-In podcast guy. So thank you very much for your time. Martin Scorsese says, everybody has a story to tell, so make yours today on Saga. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Russell, and this is a demo of Saga. So I've opened the app. I'll go to my movie project, Shadow Protocol. I've got the log line and a theme already. I've chosen a story archetype, but I can even mash it up with different story archetype. When I come to something that I'm stuck on, I get writer's block, I can hit generate. Now, the B story is something a lot of new writers will skip it, or they don't even know they need it, but all great movies have one, a subplot that reinforces the theme of the movie with a secondary character. So when I click generate, Saga is going to look at the theme, all of my characters, any acts or beats I've written, come up with 5 ideas, and you can see stories about Sarah Mitchell, Dr. Morales. So I can just pick one, edit it if I want, and that brings us to the characters page. So you can see I've got my protagonist and antagonist, a lot of the secondary characters, the ally, the love interest. Each of them can have a different character arc. If I want to make them more multi-dimensional and relatable, I can stack up a few archetypes. And anything I need help with, I can click generate. Same for the acts and all of the beats. And finally, I'm ready to screenwrite. Got the first 23 scenes of my script done already, but I get some notes from my agent that says this scene needs to be more dramatic and give Mercer more dialogue. Just by clicking the button, I can immediately get a rewrite, a draft for this scene. And there we go. You can accept it or reject it. Obviously, you can come in and edit anything you want. You can select lines and rewrite things, say make jokes funnier or scenes a few seconds longer. And finally, we're at the storyboard page, so I can create a new shot for any scene. You can see a list of common shot types and camera levels, and we have diagrams here for anyone that's new to cinematography. type anything I want, click generate. And you can see some images here. I like this one. Now it knows that Raven is Jamila's nickname, knows what she looks like, and her tent from the script and the characters pages. You can even type, zoom in on her eyes, and click animate. Now that takes a few seconds, so I'll show you one I've already created here. That looks great. So we've got full previs animatics, and soon anyone can make a full movie in Saga. So thanks for watching.
Hello everyone, my name is Fran, and I'm so excited to share my exciting project for you. Is AI designer, your AI product designer for you. I know maybe most of you are founders of the startups. Maybe you need designer to help you design the user interface. So we made an AI designer to help you design your website. Yeah. So both of us maybe know the user interface determines the user first impression of your product. It's very important. But when we start to design a product interface, something real like that. Yeah. Maybe out of the fashion, a lot of details, yes, a bunch of the products. So we did it with AI. We're using AI to generate the user interface design. Even you don't know how to use Figma, the conversational editing like this. So you just tell the AI what you want to build. It will give you the beautiful design. Okay, let me show you some of the results. Designs from our AI. It's a website landing page of robots. All the designs from our Reddit. Yeah. All the buttons. Even like the HR SaaS workflow. It's also like a dashboard page. It also can generate it. Even the mobile page. Also, the AI design with the front end. It's production ready code, like React Vue front end code. It's 100% as same as the design. Okay, thanks. It's ready.ai. So if you are a founder, you can take a picture to help you with the design. We have free version. Yeah.